Hi, this is Ken Parker, and I'm happy to welcome you to Common Ground, the policy roundtable where we discuss issues of concern to Newton residents and try to hammer out some of our differences. For those of you who are new to the show, let me review the rules. First, I introduce a topic. Then we go around the table once, with each panelist expressing a viewpoint. I then select the two panelists who disagree the most strongly and ask them to speak directly to one another in hopes of finding some area of agreement. At the end of the segment, I provide my 2 cents on the topic and an assessment of how we did at finding common ground. We have a little bit of a variation from our usual theme today in that we are going to focus in on one topic with 2 subtopics. So that topic being the proposed Newton zoning changes. There's 2 subtopics to that. One is the village center zoning, and the other is what's called the MBTA Communities Act, both of which are on the fast track to be considered and potentially pass this year before the City Council and become law immediately thereafter, as of the beginning of next year, and could potentially very significantly change the development landscape in the city. We've, of course, focused on these issues in past panels, and on our last episode talked about one aspect of this, but our audience has been so excited by this very sexy topic of zoning that they've insisted that we go deeper into it. And what we've done this time is we're going to get another perspective on the zoning changes, this one from a panel of architects. So these are the people, of course, we all hire to design our homes and to build businesses in the community. And so they have as good a sense, I think, as anyone of what the built landscape looks and feels like. So I'm really excited to hear their perspective on what's proposed for the city. So without further ado, let me introduce tonight's very distinguished panelists. To my left is Mark Hirschman. Good to meet you, Mark. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Appreciate it.
Now, Mark, you're, as I introduced, a Newton architect. Where do you practice? Are you a solo or?
Yes, it's a boutique practice here in Newton, and been practicing for a few decades.
A few decades.
Few decades.
You don't want to say how many? Or?
3 plus.
3 plus.
3 plus.
All in Newton? You've been here all that time?
No. Originally born and raised in Brooklyn. Then on the way.
You lost the accent, though.
Well,
you don't have the Anthony Fauci accent.
When I was in Brooklyn, people said, "Are you from Syracuse?"
Oh, really?
So from Brooklyn to Cornell to Harvard GSD and practicing first in Arlington and now in Newton.
And so you've also been involved a little bit in the political side of things. Have you, to the extent that, are you a member of any of these advocacy groups? There's one to preserve Newton's villages. Have you been involved in any of these?
Well, I'd like to consider it as not political. And that's the interesting angle that we're taking about the zoning, and that is as architects.
Yeah, I can't even remember the names of half of these groups. But
yes.
There was one a few years ago that was talking about the development on Needham Street. Anyway, well, it's...
Yeah, rather than the advocacy, I was on Mayor Seti Warren's zoning reform task force, and we had a more recent group that's been responding to zoning for consulting.
Well, Mark, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on. I'm so excited to get the benefit of your knowledge and experience in this conversation.
Pleasure.
And Robert Fezzik.
Again.
Fezzik,
you got it right.
I said it right. I always say it, when I say it right, I think I said it wrong, though. That's my problem, Robert.
Thank you.
But Robert, of course, you're also a Newton architect. You and I have talked about various projects over the years, and I've already had the benefit of your wisdom at various times as we've looked at what's happening in our community.
Sure.
You're also a Newton resident and practicing architect?
Yeah, so I've been in the Highlands for 30 years, not practicing there for that entire time. I've worked with the MBTA, with firms working with the MBTA. I worked on the Big Dig project for several years.
So you'll be spot on the MBTA Communities Act part of this. You have a lot of familiarity there anyway.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the practices and habits of large institutional.
Any other committees, commissions, anything else you want to tell? Were you part of the Crystal Lake Task Force?
I
or
started the whole movement to obtain the property at Rogers Street for the bathhouse, and have been a founding member of the Crystal Lake Conservancy until very recently, and now very recently, even more recently, a member of the Newton Highlands Area Council.
I am going to have to arm wrestle you for being the first to suggest that. Pretty sure I beat you by a little bit on it, but you were tremendously helpful.
And
in
you were
that
very,
effort.
very helpful too. Thank you. No, I was going to get to you.
Yeah, no. Anyway, no, but it was a pleasure to work with you on that and
Yeah.
so many other issues over the years.
And you know, Mayor Cohen still says that's the best thing he did during his term.
Wow. Well, there you go then. I remember, I won't say his name, but I got to spend time in the office of the then owner of the property, because what we needed, my mission was to get him to say that he was willing to sell it, because Mayor Cohen was not willing to buy that property by eminent domain if the owner wasn't willing to sell it. So I said, ask for as much money as you want, and he did.
Yes.
And that was all we needed. And then Mayor Cohen was happy to take it by eminent domain once it was for sale. He didn't want to take it if it wasn't for sale. So that was, but that was an exciting trip to that.
That was a great thing.
But anyway, reminiscing about old times. Gosh, that must be like 20 years ago now almost. Getting close anyway.
15, 16, so yeah, could be.
Anyway, well, the years pass faster and faster. Well, and so do the minutes. So let's dive in to our first topic. Let me introduce it as follows. For those of our viewers who saw the last episode, they know that the state legislature passed a law that the city is trying to respond to and needs to respond to by the end of the year, the MBTA Communities Act, but we've kind of put that on the back burner in Newton while we deal with this village center proposal first. And our panel last time of a couple members of the city council, Mark Laredo and Pam Wright, they both expressed the view we were doing it backwards. So we're going to take Mark and Pam's advice tonight, and we're going to do it in the other order.
Great.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry. We're going to talk about it in the order that the city's talking about it, keeping in mind that there may be some issues with that. So I know I just said that backwards, but we're talking about it backwards too, so that's fine. Anyway, so the topic about village centers is right now one of the defining characteristics of Newton is that it has 13, or depending on who you ask, maybe 14 villages. And in my view, the defining characteristic of those villages is that each village center has a little commercial district in it. Unlike most communities, most suburban communities that are primarily residential, if you go to a Weston or a Wayland, there's a few businesses scattered here and there on main streets. But we have these very commercial village centers surrounded by residential areas. And they're, maybe 13 of them still. Some would argue that Thompsonville kind of lost its village center when Route 9 came through, but more or less, about a dozen of them anyway. So what I saw, and this is the thing that I'm very curious about, the architect's perspective on, I saw in some of these proposals, and I was asking Mark and Pam about last show, was it looks like they want to turn the zoning in the village centers from being commercial to being residential, and allowing quite a bit of residential development by right, without, in other words, permission of the city council, without the special permit process. And so I'm really interested from an architect's perspective, what would that look like? How will our village centers look potentially if we pass this? And I know Mark has put a ton of work into this and actually has some visuals. And since a picture is worth 1,000 words, Mark, I wanted to know if you'd be so kind as to walk us through some of the images you've created of what our village centers might look like if this zoning comes to pass.
Well, thank you very much. And we are ready to walk through and take a look at our
We're ready.
village
Is the
center.
technology ready? That's always
That's
the
what
question.
we're going to find out. So I guess we can start. So we've presented some of this information
So
to,
if you
to
want-
the village councils. And this is a variation of that
perfect.
information.
There we go.
And we started a year previous to this, we did a talk on what makes a village center inviting. And what we discovered as architects throughout studies of communities locally and through the country and even abroad is that 1, 2, and 3-story buildings in a village center is what makes it a village. Above that is urban. It's a construct. And so that's a theme
So it looks
that
like
we developed.
downtown Boston, basically, if you've got bigger buildings
Correct.
than that.
And you can pick other cities.
Right,
I
well-
like to refer to Brooklyn.
Okay, okay.
But that's okay.
Sure.
So, without further ado, we'll take a look at what the council and planning department have been proposing. And
Great.
what they have is Village Center 1, 2, and 3. 1 was a mix of residential and commercial. They've been scaling that back to residential. We'll focus more on the center of the village centers, which are VC 2 and 3. Their proposal is
So
you
these
can
are the
see,
denser, the most dense proposed districts,
Yes.
but they're housing. And right now, just so I understand this, when we looked at the maps last time, it looked like you didn't even need first-story businesses. You could by right put residential right where we have stores in Newton Center and other village centers. Am I
Correct.
right about that?
correct.
Now, do you have some images you can show us
Yes.
what
and-
that would look like?
And that's what we're going to go through. The proposal is to basically redevelop all our village centers with a new higher
now,
density
what are we looking
zoning.
at here? Is this Newton Center?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, great.
So you can see VC3, VC2.
What color is it? So it's VC,
Red.
3 is red.
2 is blue. And then
1 is green then?
Right, right.
And so 3 is the one that looks like right in the center. So that's
Right.
that's the densest one, the red
Yes,
one.
yes.
Okay,
Now,
great.
They're suggesting that there's going to be modifications to the maps, perhaps a little bit of change, but it's a moving target. This is the intent. And as we were talking about the overlay of MBTA, will
So Mark, could
Yes.
do you have an image of what one of these streets that people are
Yes.
familiar with? Like if we take, say, Beacon Street,
Yes.
can you show us what that would look
Well, we're
like?
going to be going through it quickly, or as rapidly, or as much as you'd like to see. This is Langley Road, Newton Center.
Okay.
A nice, comfortable church in the area. We have parking. They actually rezoned the parking to VC3, which is 4.5 stories.
So what would that look like? Oh my goodness. So that's the triangle in Newton
yes,
Center?
yes.
Wow.
And then if
oh,
we fill up across the street,
that doesn't look like
and-
the Newton Center that
and-
I grew up.
the church is included too in that
Oh,
zone.
geez, you're gonna wait. That's historic, isn't that going to be preserved? If
Well, that's the interesting thing. Now there's calls for preserving some of these things, but it's Johnny come lately. It has not. It is not
so
preserved.
potentially, let's put this on the screen so people can appreciate this. Can you just there we go. So this is looking west from. So basically, if to my right is the ice cream shop, the JP Lex, I am now looking west towards the what is now the green where the performances are.
Right.
Down,
Correct.
So there's
Right towards Center Street.
right. So that's Center Street. Straight. I'm looking straight down at Center Street, and okay. So this is the existing view, and this is with built out. And by the way, did you design this building? Where is the design of this building from?
Well, it's actually from Colorado, I believe. I had to look around the country to find the 3.5, 4.5 story buildings that met these parameters, and I picked a number of them around the country that fit the description of what they're looking to
I
do.
mean, can you put that back up on the screen with the view looking west in Newton Center? Because what I wonder about, Mark, is people who see this are going to go, you know what? The city council gets a proposal to put that in. They're never going to vote for it as a special permit. But is it the case that they could do this by right without even going to the city council?
The proposal is by right.
So so you wouldn't have the land use committee with people like Mark Laredo on it looking at it and going, this isn't consistent with the historic character. And I think by and large, members of the city council, they're going to look at that and say, no, we would never allow that. But what you're saying is they would allow it without even knowing it, just by passing these zoning changes by simple majority, which they're considering doing right now.
Right.
It's hard
Are
to,
there any other village? Oh, sorry, go ahead,
Right.
Robert.
yeah, well, it's hard to tell exactly how much they know and how much of the council knows of it. because the process has been rather light on exposition.
Well, that's what we're trying to expose right now.
We're doing here.
Okay.
Well, we've
Right.
had to do this because the city's process has not done this. It's shown us a few images here and there, idealized,
Right.
not even up to the current
Right.
level of
No, I've noticed that their images don't build out as much as the zoning would allow, which makes no sense. You want to see what you're authorizing, right? So, Mark, do you have any other village centers that
Yes,
you can show
and
us?
we could go through them. And
Yeah, well, just let's hit a couple. You have
well,
Newtonville? What do you
yeah,
have?
Here we go. Here's an example: Elm Street, West Newton.
Okay,
Now,
so let's get oriented for our audience. So we are looking north. It looks like into West Newton Square. Am I right about that?
correct.
And so is that the courthouse off in the distance, that red brick building?
I don't know.
I don't know. My vision isn't good enough to quite make it out.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Looks like it might be.
The important thing is we have an example on the right-hand side of a more recent 2.5-story building.
Okay.
That, from our metrics, that would be acceptable.
Okay.
But what's proposed
But wait a
is
second.
otherwise.
Is that a commercial or a residential building? That existing building?
That is commercial on the first
Okay.
floor
And-
and some residences above.
Okay, which is typical of our village centers.
Yes.
And historically in Newton Center, there were upper story
Right,
residences.
but only within a floor or an additional floor. But this is what's proposed.
Okay, let's see it.
4.5 stories. And so they would replace that
It
building.
starts to look just like the version in Newton Center.
Correct.
You
correct.
can't really. It loses its
Correct.
character as being West Newton. It's
And then talking about other areas that are not protected, like Woburn.
okay. Woburn is not very dense at all right now. You've got the T on the south side of Beacon Street. On the north side, you've got where the barber I used to go to is, and there's a little hardware store. That is Barry's Delicatessen still there. I think. Okay, it is. All right. So there's a few businesses. There used to be a Bank of America. I don't know what replaced it. And then of course you got the Starbucks across the street near the T. So. And some of us were around long enough to remember when that was a liquor store before it was even a Starbucks.
okay.
But let's see what that looks like
Yeah.
now. Now let's see. Okay,
Right.
there we are. We're looking at the north side of Beacon Street. Oops.
So that's the whole block.
Okay. All right. There's the one on the corner that used to be the
Called the
Bank of
Strong Block.
America. I don't know what it is now.
Yes.
But
And the discussion is we want vibrant village centers. Now, when it comes to retail, these retail establishments are vibrant. They're used. You can't pack more at the ground level to make it any more vibrant. What are they doing? Proposing is a lot more stuff above, and it turns it from village to city.
well, not just above, but you could replace the first floor with
Right.
residential.
And
too.
this
well,
has
that's
the
what the MBTA Act is,
Right.
is asking
Right.
for.
Okay.
And
Well,
the-
and we
There's a
will.
little conflict.
Spoiler alert!
Yeah,
right?
sorry.
No, that's okay. We'll get to that.
Now,
Soon enough.
I should mention that the Councilor Humphrey is beginning a process for historical assignment here. But again, it's cart behind the horse.
So some of the councilors are raising historic questions and want exceptions to this, right? But they're okay.
If I may
Sure.
elaborate on that, only because of our pressures.
Yes. The folks in
Councillor
Woburn-
Humphrey is very much in favor for this high density, completely. And the discussion.
Not all the councilors are, though.
Right.
I've heard from some. Like, of course, we had Mark Laredo, the former president of the city council and chair of the land use committee, who's on expressed concerns. Pam Wright.
Of
who
course.
expressed concerns. Emily Norton has expressed concern. I believe Tariq Lucas, a number of councilors. I think Lyle Baker, Lenny Gentile. I could go on. I think
Yes.
a number have expressed concerns about this. But can you show us what
Right.
Woburn would look like
Right.
before we? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, you used a different color building for
Right.
Woburn.
We
To-
just have a
to-
variety. Yeah.
To this date, this property is not protected. And it's only because of our advocacy that councils are lining up,
Well-
at least for these precious
Well,
areas.
just to be clear, Mark, everything's protected right now because it's built out to the zoning under. They need a special permit to change it now. They have to pass this zoning change to unprotect it.
Correct.
So right now they can't do this. The developer can only do this if and when the city council authorizes it by passing the new proposed village center zoning. All right, so that's Woburn. Any other village centers?
Yes. Some of the proposals on the residential front were as follows. The
So you said on the
proposals,
what is
well,
this
this is
the three, or
VC1.
This is still VC1?
VC1.
Okay.
So
So this is
again,
the least
density.
dense. This is the one that showed up as green on
Yes.
your chart? Okay.
So
This is at the periphery. So what
Yes.
street are we looking at here?
That would be
Woodward.
Woodward, going
Yeah.
around the corner to Woodward.
Okay, so you're still in the general Woburn area,
Right.
but you're a little bit outside of the heart
Right.
of Woburn
Right.
Center.
So
So
the
you want to show us
current
what's
proposal,
there now and what
Yes,
they're talking
yes.
about? I think these images do a great job of illustrating
Right,
what
right.
we're talking about here.
So
Yeah.
again, because of feedback, they are
show-
pulling
can- yeah.
back on this density.
All right.
And they're in flux, but thank goodness we have advocacy.
Well, just to be
pointing
clear,
out
what
what's
is the
going
current
on.
proposal that was in the city councilors' packets a few weeks ago, or maybe it's a month ago now?
Yeah.
Is this reflective of what they were last proposed?
No, they've downsized the
Correct.
VC1 to
Correct.
talking about a maximum of
So this
4 units.
slide looks like the one from like a couple months before that.
Yes,
basically.
yes. The important thing for the public to know, without the pushback, they would have continued on this path.
Well,
This was to put 10 units on a parcel.
Okay.
A single family unit, as much as 10 units, or even more if you could
yeah,
do
no,
that.
actually, yeah, no, we did the math on the last show that if you had 400 square foot units, you could fit a lot more than 10. You could fit 10 per floor.
There you go.
On a, on
Right. Right.
If you had a 4,000 square foot base of the building, which wouldn't, and because there's no setback requirements, that you wouldn't need a lot more than 4,000 square foot lot. You would need a little bit more potentially because you'd need to be able to get into the underground parking, assuming they don't do away with the parking requirements, which they're also considering.
And we should mention that the Woburn Area Council has done their own visuals because they weren't getting what they needed from the
city either.
So they wanted to show their constituency, their village, what they were going to get. So people can go to their website and look at what they've done there as well.
All right. Well, I don't want to take the whole show looking at
Right.
the images, but do you have one of Newtonville? I'd love to.
Yeah,
Because
yep.
Newtonville is like, again, kind of the heart of the city. You've got the Walnut Street going right through the middle and
Right.
goes up to meets Washington there. Do you have any
Right,
images of that
right.
area?
The two critical areas, Newtonville and we'll take a look at that. Here's a graphic of the section of that street overlaid,
Okay,
and
you
this
have
is
you have the way it looks now. Okay, I
yes,
see.
this is what it
Okay,
looks now.
all right, let's
1
look
and
at
2
that.
stories.
Just to back up for 1 second, I'm looking south on Walnut Street. So the taco place is on my right a little bit down there. There's a couple banks there. There's like I think a Brookline Bank and maybe a Bank of America. Bank of America. And then
Correct.
there's where the Asian food place used to be. I forget. There's a Thai restaurant there. So we're looking south. Restaurants on the right. On the left is where the CVS was. I don't know, something replaced that recently.
No, you've done a good job recognizing all the struggling businesses
Yeah, right.
as we're led to
Right.
understand.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, no, but I mean,
They are
there's
doing
always
well.
been turnover. I mean, but we use these businesses a lot, and you know,
They're
and
doing well.
if you look at, for example, the Brewers Coalition was on the corner down there. It's not like it was struggling. It was there for a number of years, and now there's a new business
Right.
moving in already
Right.
there. So
So
Quite
this is the
remarkable
proposal.
that these businesses have come back after COVID.
right. Well, I mean, there was a lot of takeout ordering, at least in
Yeah.
my household, for a couple of years there. I know a lot of people went through that. The extreme caution. In Newton, other parts of the country weren't like that. You travel other places, they were just business as usual during a lot of the pandemic. But anyway, but I digress. So,
Right.
okay, why don't you show us what
Right.
you could build this out
Right.
to, Mark?
So the gray shows the proposal.
Can you do it full screen so people can see it? There you go. Thank you.
Yes, the proposal that's existing, the gray, that's a smaller proposal for VC2. What they're proposing is VC3.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, and then we'll see what it looks like on one side.
Yeah,
And then the other
And really,
side.
when you say 4.5, 3.5, you really, for all intents and purposes,
The
you
half
might as well
is a
call
real-
it 5.
Yeah, the
Because
four
they're
and a
only
half.
talking about 6 feet setback from the face of the main building.
So from a pedestrian standpoint, you feel like you're in a canyon with five
Sure,
five
and the
story
shadows
buildings.
and everything else.
And how many feet can each story be when you say 5
Well,
stories?
up to 18 feet is this the standard for the first level,
Mm-hmm.
which, by the way, we've done our own, Mark went around and I went around and measured what things are like in the villages now.
Mm-hmm.
They're around 12, 14, sometimes 15 feet. 18 feet is this new commercial standard, and it
So
just-
how, is there a maximum building height that they have in this proposal?
well, 18 plus 12 plus 12 plus 12 or
Here.
11, I can't remember.
We have some numbers.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
well,
28 is our existing 2-story buildings. They're proposing 44 at the front, 62 in the back, 57 at the
So-
front, 75 at the back.
So
Those
62 feet tall.
75. 75.
Okay, so they're talking saying that's 28 feet now, and they're rezoning it to be
75.
almost 3 times as tall. Wow.
Correct.
And you can use that sort of ratio volumetrically as well. So we keep looking only at the street views, but you can imagine if you were in the neighborhood just outside of the street.
So I mean, it would look a little bit like Brooklyn, frankly. There are those high-rise apartments
Yes,
there.
yes.
And again, if
yes.
you go to
And my brother lived in one by Prospect Park for a while. It was about 5 stories, and right along the park they had those
Right.
those dense buildings. That's
and again
kinda- which some people like, by the way, but it's not the Newton that we know. It's a very different community.
yeah, and again here the Newtonville Area Council commissioned their own city planner to visualize the area of the zoning changes for their community to see, and it's very striking. I would-
So people could probably Google Newtonville Area Council
Yes.
or Woburn Area Council and see these images online if they want to.
Right.
I don't have the URLs handy, but
Yeah.
Right.
but
No.
so these gentlemen have put a lot of work into this, but others have as well to try to illustrate what's going on. It's really amazing that people don't know about this at all. It's just
Well, it's quite amazing that our zoning and planning department didn't do the work that other people are now doing, because because this is standard stuff.
right. but Robert, I mean, I remember when they had a previous process, they had like all these little pins you could put or balls you could put, and you'd slide them around.
Yeah.
And which ideas do you like? And they when the city wants to go all out in having a process to inform people about something, they have the resources and the structure and the email lists. They could very easily show us this if they wanted to show us
Yes.
this, I would think.
If they wanted to.
Right.
Well, that's what concerns me, is it seems like it's sort of a stealth proposal.
Right.
It's that's been the nature of the process. There's been outreach, but it's not been broadly.
Right, but I mean, I've been to
Available.
some of the city presentations over the years, not the recent round,
No.
and I've never seen anything that truly reflected the build-out that would be allowable by right under these proposals. My colleague Nathaniel Lichten and I started writing a white paper on one of the earlier proposals, but it was such a fast-moving target, we couldn't complete the analysis by the time they kept changing it, and then they pulled it back until after the election, and
Right.
so we ended up not finishing it. The number of units they would allow in resident, that wasn't limited to village centers, that was citywide, basically doing away effectively with restricting any lot in the city to be single family. They were allowing multifamily by right everywhere under that proposal. This is
That has been
restrict-
next. Yeah.
Yeah, that's chapter 2, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But they did pull that back for now. That's not in the so-called village center proposal.
Correct.
All right.
Correct.
You have one more slide that's really
Yeah,
compelling? You
Can you
want
take
to
us to
show
the
us? or-
Highlands?
Yes.
I'm a Highlands guy.
Oh yeah,
Right.
okay. I live in the
Right,
Highlands
right,
too.
right.
Let's look at the Highlands, and then I'd like to talk for a couple more minutes about this topic before we move on to our second one, just to.
So this is Lincoln Street. So if we look at Lincoln Street.
Slow down. Mark.
Right.
Go back to the first image. Okay, because you got to let people take a look at it, get oriented. So here we are. I live in the Highlands, and I'm still taking. There's the plaza. Oh, okay. Now I see which way I'm facing. I'm facing east towards the T station.
Yes.
There's the plaza off to the right. It's a funny angle. The church would be to my right, and I can't see it. And the place where we got the pizza that I brought to the studio, 57 Lincoln, is off to the left. You can't see it there. You're looking towards the T station on Lincoln Street. Okay, I'm now oriented. There's a line of businesses on the left there. Okay, now what are they proposing to do to this?
Okay. Similarly, VC3,
Okay.
which is the 75 feet height.
Oh my goodness. That doesn't
Wait,
look
wait,
like my Newton Highlands.
Here we go.
Now that's looking, okay,
And
Well, this is a different
this
orientation.
is
Now Otaki
Stevens
Sushi
Street.
Bistro's on the right. You've turned me around
Yeah.
now.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
So we see it, the build out from one end of the street, and we will now see it from the other end of the
Okay,
street.
so here, again, Walnut Street is behind me. I'm looking down Lincoln Street. There's Otaki. There's the Greek place, I think it is,
Yep.
on the left.
Grape Leaf.
Grape Leaf, thank you. And I'm looking down towards Woodward at the other end. Can't quite see it. The Hyde School and Parks on the left. Okay. Now show us. Can you put that back to full screen,
Right.
please, so we can, or oh, I don't know. We're not.
There we go. See, this is the VC2 height, which would be too big anyway, but they're proposing the VC4.
It's hard. I wonder if there we go. Oh no,
Okay.
it's not. It's not. Oh, there. That's what we need. Okay. So that's Lincoln Street looking west. Not as it is now. Well, you can see as it is now in the background, and they're proposing way up there off the screen even. Can't
So
even
that
see
would be
whole
the
thing.
build out.
Okay. Yeah. So leave it at the build out for a sec, just so
Right.
people can. Without the shadows, can you go back to the one before that? So I just want to picture
Take that in.
myself. So of course, this is where every spring we have Village Day in the Highland. They rope off the street and people use the businesses, and there aren't a lot of businesses left. There isn't. Yeah, this is again not the Newton Highlands that I've lived in for what 25 years. I've lived in Newton Highlands now.
And you know, Mark's done a great job putting these buildings in, but he hasn't been able to put in all the shadows that would come with these heights of the buildings as well.
It feels pretty claustrophobic even without them,
Yeah.
but yeah. Well, the sun's in the west, so there'd be a shadow kind of coming towards you. Actually, southwest. Yeah, there'd be a shadow cast diagonally across the street there, because depending on the time of year, of course.
Now, what does show that's nice is no utilities going down the street.
Yeah.
That was the one good thing that the ZAP images showed, was they didn't show any utilities in their views. So I guess
We underground everything.
we
as part of-
underground everything automatically.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much,
You're very
Mark. These
welcome.
images are really compelling. Now, I know I know right now what the Newton resident reaction is going to be. Come on, the city council would never do something like this. It's not, nobody wants that. There can't be any councilor that would want that. Who wants this? I mean, really, why would anyone want to change Newton in this way? Does anyone really want this? Robert, have you
Sure.
talked to anyone who wants this to happen to Newton?
Oh, sure. No, there are.
Who would look, is there anyone who would look at those images and say, thumbs up, I really like that?
Well, that's a very good question, because when we have shown these images to those folks, they kind of sit up straight and get quiet, because this is the reality.
You think that people who might vote for this in good conscience, not realizing the effect that this would be authorized. All they're looking at is words on a page in a zoning ordinance, creating a 3K blah 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 district, and they don't fully appreciate what they'd be doing to the Garden City.
Let's understand a few things about what's happening with upzoning. This is happening across the country. So this is kind of came out of this smart cities plan, the urban density paradigm of putting more density, particularly around transit. Transit oriented is a term that's thrown around.
Yes.
Transit rich is something that we're never going to see here, frankly, because maybe that would be what you'd see in European countries that have done this sort of development, and
This
yet
doesn't look particularly European to me. I was just in Spain.
Well, yeah,
even the areas that are dense, it's lower. It's like
Right.
I mean, at least in the south of Spain where we were, you didn't see anything that looked remotely
and yet
like
even
that.
there, their historic centers, they protect them. Those protections are built in and very rigid, and you don't get you don't let the developers by right march in there and say, hey, we just bought up this block and here we go.
So just to be clear, if we were to survey the 24 members of the city council and show them these images, how many of them would say, yeah, I'd like to see that happen?
I don't know. I don't know how to get into the head of a politician, but
Well, I mean, look, I know how to get there. I ask them a question. I've had most of them on this, sitting at this table over the years. I mean, I wouldn't mind having them go over and just show them these pictures.
Yeah.
Is that what you're going for? Is that what you want to achieve? Because, and maybe they'd say, oh no, that would never really happen. But here's what I believe. I believe that the great motivating factor that drives development is not an appreciation of the aesthetic, it is an appreciation of the dollar. And that ultimately, developers will build the most profitable thing that they are allowed to build. Now, if they have to get approval from a city council, that might give them pause. But if they can build something that is denser and more profitable by right, it may not happen immediately. There may be a property owners, I like this property. Then they'll die and their heirs will sell it. But sooner or later, things get built to the maximum size. You need to look no farther than Oak Hill Park for that. Mm-hmm. Oak Hill Park was built shortly after World War II for returning veterans housing, essentially. And it was, it was open space before that. And they have these little one-story, your architects, what are the word? Capes, are they called?
Capes, bungalows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very small. I think they were like 1,000 square foot houses.
Yeah.
And over the years, people put little additions. They made some split levels there. But what has happened over the years is property after property, when it comes on the market, it becomes a total teardown, and they build out not close to, but exactly at the densest they're allowed to build. And right now, frankly, it doesn't look terrible in most places in Oak Hill Park. They're, they're 2.5 story houses, and it's being but it seems to me inevitable that if this passes, it's going to get built. Maybe not everywhere, and certainly not immediately, but that's the direction we would be heading. Am I wrong about that?
It would be a total transformation of our communities.
Well, you can talking about tear downs. Just residentially, we've seen here in the last decade, every year more than 100 tear downs, and a significant proportion of those are development tear downs, and those always go up in size and hugely in price. So this missing middle has been vanishing. So the affordable property, quote unquote, for Newton anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's the big lie, of course.
Right.
The big lie at the heart of all this zoning effort is that the zoning changes by building more housing, it's going to become more affordable. I will tell you how I know that's a lie. I live on Walnut Street in Newton Highlands, and across the street from me, there was an older two-family house.
Right.
And that was torn down, and by right, the developer built out to the maximum, kind of a snout house with the garages poking out, basically no open space in front of the house, 2 big driveways, a little strip of green.
Yep.
And it's built out to the maximum dimensions, and I believe each of those 2 units sold for $1.7 million. So I will posit, is there anyone in the Boston area or in the country who has the means to purchase a $1.7 million home who, if that unit were not available, would be homeless?
No, of course not.
It's not, we don't have a housing crisis for a rich people housing crisis. So building more housing for rich people doesn't solve any problem. Right. There's no rich person who can't find a place in Newton or in the greater Boston area. We have a housing crisis at the low end. So real zoning reform, in my view, would be allowing small units. That would be, but there is no cap on the unit size in this proposal.
Right.
I mean, unless they've changed it, because it is a moving target. But correct me if I'm wrong. Is there a?
I think they are putting in minimums.
They're minimum or maximum?
Minimums, I believe.
Yeah. So I'm talking about a maximum to make them affordable. Minimums doesn't create affordability. It creates expense, right? If you make a minimum square footage. Right. The bigger it is, the more expensive it is. Okay. Anyway, I've done my rant on this. I mean, I think it's incredibly deceptive that they say this is for affordability, but it's really the exact opposite. One more anecdote. When I worked for Congressman Barney Frank on Capitol Hill, he was focused on the use of what was then called urban development action grant funds and community development block grant funds, where cities and towns would take the money, take existing housing, which wasn't maybe in the best shape, but was very affordable, and they tear it down and gentrify. Sometimes they were building parking lots, sometimes they were building hotels, but often they were just building new, big, modern units and wiping out the actual naturally affordable housing and using our taxpayer dollars to do it. That, to me, is fundamentally wrong, and this is kind of a repeat of that on a certain level.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's exactly the issue. And that building a lot of units, replacing a single-family home, is just creating more expensive, smaller units and giving these people less for a lot more money.
Let's turn to this MBTA Communities Act, because to me, I found it mind-boggling on the last show to hear that we're doing this village center zoning, but before the end of the year, and I know how fast the city council moves, particularly on zoning, after we do that, we're going to have to comply with the MBTA Communities Act. But there's no clock ticking on the village center zoning. I don't know why we don't do our MBTA Communities Act compliance first. But what's crazy is what they're proposing for the village center zoning is actually contradictory to the MBTA Communities Act, as I understand it. And I don't know. I'm really excited to hear both of your perspective on this. But let me put it specifically. The MBTA Communities Act only counts units. Doesn't count what you build, first of all. It counts what you zone that could be built within certain parameters. And so their proposals, first of all, as I understand it, don't maximize the number of qualifying units in the areas they rezone. In other words, the village center zoning isn't set to their 1,000 square feet. It isn't set to create the maximum number, to be compliant with the MBTA Communities Act. And the MBTA's Community Act does not allow first floor zoning. So what I ask Mark to show me, in other words, does not allow first floor commercial. So here's what I asked Mark to come up with, and I think he may have. You don't need to put it on the screen yet, Mark. You can get it ready. But is why in the world would we comply with the MBTA Communities Act by putting our residential units where our commercial tax base and our village centers are? Why wouldn't we put it somewhere within that half-mile radius where it wouldn't be wiping out our village centers? In other words, can't we comply without killing our village centers? And so what I'd ask Mark to do is show me a graphic of how big that circle is, because you have to put the units within a half mile of the village center. You don't have to put them where your commercial tax base is. And the way I think, I'm a half mile from the Newton Highlands Village Center, and I'm not in the village center. And I'm half mile from the T station, I should say. There's a lot of units, a lot of land, a lot of possibility for creativity within a half mile radius. Mark, can you show us what that looks like with a map of Newton?
Yes.
Like how?
So
what would qualify
as
under MBTA?
I think we're ready to bring that up.
All right. Because this has been driving me nuts ever since our show where Mark and Pam told me about that.
All right.
And one could go deeply into how they came up with these projections, because my looking at the data that MAPC was using is
Massachusetts
Massachusetts area planning
Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
So this is what the mayor signed on to.
Okay.
She signed on to, with other mayors, to this proposed projection of 200, 300,000 units of housing. Yet one can
200, 300,000, not all in Newton, though, right?
No, through the metro.
But because we only have 30,000 units right now, so that would be quite an expansion.
But even there, one can compare these projections with the population trends, and big question marks come up right away.
Yeah, no, I mean, what's frustrating to me is that we're not focused on compliance with the act. We're not focused on the goal of creating affordable housing. The things that we're doing seem to be whimsical about what someone thinks a village center ought to look like when we have these pressing deadlines and legitimate societal goals of making the communities more affordable, but we're doing it in a way that we're not even doing it. We're looking at proposals that would actually make the area less affordable. It's just makes me want to pull my hair out. But can you show the?
Yes. So following is the half-mile radius circles that will impact our community.
Okay, this is great. I almost wish we could zoom in a little more.
Right.
So if it's possible.
Right. So here's
So
the red line is, it's light, but that's the red line for the city of Newton.
So can
here's
we
the
zoom in
circles.
like on Newton Center or Newton Highlands just so you can see? Is it?
Can he do it from the?
You can't just do Command
perhaps,
plus on your laptop.
perhaps.
Command plus, I think, would do it, or Control plus. I'm a Mac guy, so I don't know.
Okay.
We've got
Let's
it.
see
We've
if
got
we
the. We
can.
have the technology.
Yeah.
I think. Anyway, if we can't, I can squint, I guess.
Yeah. I
So,
don't think we
and
have.
just
You
while-
don't
while
have the ability to zoom in there.
While he's doing that, one
Maybe even turning the mouse wheel sometimes zooms in. No.
No.
All right.
No.
So the Control plus maybe you want
But where's the
Control
plus?
right over there,
Yeah.
something like that.
There we go. You got it. Excellent.
Okay. So now we can scroll across the image with the arrow keys. There's an arrow key right here. Okay. You got an
There
arrow
we
key?
go.
Oops, no, you're changing slides. That didn't work.
Okay.
All right, let's go back to that other slide and then. Oh, you got to this. All right, you were on the right slide.
Okay. Here we go.
Oh, nope. Okay, well,
that wants to switch.
I got greedy. We were
Yes, you
zoomed
did.
in, and then.
Here we go.
Oh, okay,
Here we go.
perfect.
Here we go.
All right, so maybe we can't scroll across this, but if we can put that full. Oh, there we go. Okay, so you can see, this is perfect actually. Just leave it right there. Don't touch a
Okay.
thing. Don't touch
There
a
you go.
thing. We're good. Look at these circles. They, in most cases, overlap, and other than that, they're butting up against each other. Most of Newton would comply. Most of the land in Newton can be used to comply with the MBTA Communities Act. So my thought is we ought to have a two-pronged approach. First of all, we ought to change zoning where we have existing housing because it counts even if the housing's already there. So we ought to change the zoning where there's already compliant housing and get credit so we're out from under the control of this. Then the second prong is we ought to invest in creating actually affordable housing by making smaller units, waiving parking requirements, whatever we need to do, but where you're going to get units that are actually affordable and they aren't $1.7 million. By the way, and I say $1.7 million, if you look at what the rents are in the new thing on Washington Street, they are like $5,000 a month for a relatively small apartment. You can look in the listings. It's crazy. They're not affordable. Right. This zoning is not designed, in my view, to create affordable housing. But Robert, you may disagree. What do you think?
No, well, of course the proponents would say, no, there'll be a certain percentage of affordable units involved in these. Well, that's another problem with the MBTA Act, because the MBTA Act doesn't talk about affordable units. They don't care about affordable units the way they've designed it. They just want units.
Yeah, which is a shame because the old comprehensive permit law does talk about affordable units and requires you to have 25% affordability.
Right. So Newton is ahead of the curve there, but it doesn't comply with the MBTA in that respect.
The irony is, if we wanted to comply, and Pam Wright points this out, we could zone to comply if that were our goal. And we could also, but my point is we could also create lots of affordable housing if that was our goal. But neither one of these is accomplished by either of the proposals currently on the table, which is what's so frustrating about it. And well, what's really frustrating is, Robert, what you said before, is that people don't know about it and they aren't being told about it adequately. And honestly, I was on the Board of Aldermen, now called the City Council, for 18 years. And I got to tell you, there are very few Newton residents who could name 3 members of the City Council.
Sure.
And Newton residents are incredibly smart, educated, high-powered people who read the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and can tell you far more what's going on in foreign capitals than they can in Newton City Hall.
Right.
True.
Well, and there are also people who are used to paying for someone to do things for them and be experts. So most people go, well, they must know what they're doing. And so when we have our conversations in our forums and we're saying, look, the planning department has no one who has ever worked on a rezoning project. I think there Zach may have. He may have worked a couple of years in Somerville, but they're quite inexperienced. Even Barney had
Barney Heath is the planning director?
The director had no experience of this kind at all, and no one on the city council, of course.
So you say, of course, you say names like Barney, and nobody. There's three people in our audience who know that. No, it's,
Right.
of course, it's all inside baseball. I used to know all the department heads, of course, when I was on the council. But what's interesting to me about this, though, is the question of how do you get people interested? Because it's always, over the years of my involvement in Newton politics, and I don't think politics is a dirty word.
Yep.
It's the lifeblood of democracy, the political process, holding elected officials accountable for their decisions. But the lifeblood, the Newton politics process has always been very reactive. In other words, if somebody proposes to build something next to your house, or to put a dog park where you don't want one, or not to put a dog park where you do want one, or something, people in Newton will get riled up, they'll protest, they'll show up, they'll overflow not only the first level of the council chamber, but the top, and they'll be picketing outside. But if it isn't immediate and specific, people just don't get interested here. And so, to me, this has always been the big question of how you get. What do you do?
And without local press.
Do you have the?
Well, we lost our local press.
Well, we do have Fig City News, which Amy Sangiello and Bruce Henderson.
They're trying.
FigCityNews.com. It's excellent. Good coverage of the city. I mean, it's like volunteer run. I mean, Bruce Henderson, one of the most amazing people on the face of the planet, by the way, puts a huge amount of effort in it, and he's still doing like the science, the STEM blog. He does so many things for the community. But there's a whole lot of people involved in Fig City News, not just Bruce, of course. He's the editor, but anyone who wants to get informed about what's going on in the city, got to bookmark Fig City News. They've got an app now. You should download it, and you will find out some of this. And I would suggest that share some of these images with them too, if you haven't already. Let them put that, write an article, write an op-ed, put some of these images in there, because people will see that. People are reading it. Yeah. But you're absolutely right, Robert. Not having a physical tree pulp newspaper delivered to people's doorstep is a real deficiency.
With someone who can take all the information and put it in a format and organize it in a way that people can understand and critique it.
But the interesting thing when it comes to housing and architecture is the reaction is after the fact. And so that's what we're trying to bring in.
That's how Boston City Hall must have gotten built, because no one looked at the plans and go, this thing is ugly, man. Right. I mean, I hope I'm not offending either of you. Neither of you worked on it, did you?
No, that's before our time.
Okay, good. But brutalism, though, it's aptly named. Truth in advertising.
Right. But what we have to look at is the underlying premise. And the underlying premise is the thought that we actually need more housing in Massachusetts. And the numbers, the truth of the numbers is Massachusetts is losing numbers.
Losing population.
Yes, yes. So
maybe what we need is more jobs in Massachusetts to keep the people here.
Well, I think you hit on the right theme, is housing that's affordable for people.
Right.
For workers.
That
so
workers.
They can, right.
Yeah.
No, that's...
And the question is, where most appropriately can that be?
Well, the other big lie, you've just reminded me of it, Mark, and that is that these proposals are good for the environment. So there were studies that were done by the Sierra Club and others over the years, which say, the premise of which is, you want people driving less, so you want their workplaces to be as close to their homes as possible. Therefore, and what these studies have shown is that to get people to drive less, you want to have a mix of residential and commercial uses close together. But if you think about it, Newton is already primarily residential. What we need to get that mix is not the same thing that Boston needs.
Right.
Boston needs more residential to get the right mix. Newton needs more commercial. If Newton residents weren't, and are doing less so now, going down to the Seaport District or downtown to their law firms or their accounting firms and the other places they work, if they had some of those commercial uses in Newton and more vibrant commercial spaces, that would really cut down on commuting. By the same token, if you had more affordable units for the people who work in our restaurants and our businesses to live in Newton, that would cut down on the commuting. But the way they're doing it, by building more expensive housing in Newton at the expense of commercial development, not only is that terrible for our commercial tax base, but it's also bad for the environment. So that's the second big lie. First one is that these zoning proposals create affordable housing. On the contrary, they make Newton less affordable. The second big lie is that these zoning proposals are good for the environment. In fact, they create more need to commute by putting more people farther away from the places they work.
Yeah, we should mention that the whole premise of the MBTA Communities Act, it's to serve Boston. Boston's transportation system is a hub and spoke system, almost exclusively.
It's true. They should have a loop rail around 128 and around 495.
So really, the whole idea behind the MBTA's Community Act is specifically they're related to the transportation system, which is specifically to feed in Boston. We all know that the patterns of work and life have changed significantly in the last few years.
Obviously, COVID, at least for a time, was good for the environment, right? To cut down on people's driving. And more of us are spending more days working from home and not going to the office. By the way, my office is in Newton, so even when I go to the office, I have one of those offices that's available, but frankly, there aren't enough good office spaces in Newton. And I know a lot more people would have their offices in Newton if they had more options. My firm could outgrow our space in Newton and have to move farther away. But I want to give you each 15 seconds to have a closing thought on this, because we're running out of time. Mark, go ahead.
Our paradigm has changed. You're talking about working remotely. So the issue of working remotely unwinds the need as much to go to the center city. So, and then we have a whole rest of the state and other parts of the country which is less developed. Where only 6% of the United States is built out. So we have the opportunity now to spread out.
Are you suggesting we all move to Montana or something?
Well,
it's pretty.
but there are. That's why people are moving to Florida. Right. That's why people are moving to other states. And there are other parts of the states that in Massachusetts
point. I want to let Robert,
desirable.
Literally 15 seconds if you've got any closing thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think we've come to
agreement. I didn't give an assessment of how we do. Looks like you're right. You've done it. We've found common ground on a lot of this.
Yeah, we came in pretty common, and we're leaving even more common.
Well, I want to thank you both, Mark.
You're very welcome.
Pleasure to have you on.
Pleasure.
Robert, fabulous seeing you again, and thanks so much for coming on. And I have to ask you both, please come back again once these proposals reach the next stage of the process. Thank you to Will, our director, Will Carlisle. Fabulous job as always, and thank you to everyone at New TV for putting these facilities together and putting together a way that we can hear things in Newton about what's actually going on in our city. So New TV is invaluable, and thank you to everyone at home for watching. And please join us again next time when we try to find just a little bit more common ground.